Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. I have books authored and published by Triumph Press. They are available on Amazon: Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth, and Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. And you can support this podcast by buy me a coffee. You can find that in the podcast notes. I have a return guest on. I'm happy to have Elizabeth Harding Weinstein back on. Now, the wild thing about having her on my podcast was I had her on season 2, episode 144. Then I have her on episode 4, 144. So I thought I'd look up what her podcast would be for today. And that would be 111. And those are the angel numbers. And we are going to talk about a bunch,
Angel.
a bunch of evil. And we're going to bring up Catherine Kassenoff, guardianships. The last time she was on, we discussed updates to her case, that she's still in a guardianship, and the silent holocaust of slavery and human trafficking that is plaguing their justice systems as we speak. I totally welcome you, Elizabeth Harding Weinstein. How are you?
Oh, hi, Marianne. Thank you so much for having me on. Yeah, it's Memorial Day, a day of remembrance, and how fitting that this is the 1-year anniversary of when Catherine Kassenoff committed suicide instead of trying to face the trauma and the pain that she was suffering from the abuse by our judges and police who commit domestic violence on behalf of sometimes rich and powerful people, and sometimes it doesn't even matter. It's their regular job, so they're happy to do it.
Right.
So yeah, we're remembering Catherine today, and we want to kind of do an update on what some people may or may not know have happened in her case since then, and talk about some other cases that will help to exemplify for our listeners truly the unexplicable actions of the court to sex traffic children through the court and punish anybody trying to protect the children. So thank you for having me on.
I'm glad to have you on because at least I have wondered what happened to Catherine Kassenoff. She seemed like it was talked about for maybe a month or two and then radio silence.
Yes.
And I totally commend Robbie Harvey for bringing this out, but then it just kind of fizzled out.
Yes. So let me tell you the little that I understand about it. So I've been in touch with the executive of her estate, who was informed about Catherine's decision prior to it happening, unlike the rest of us who got informed the morning of or even the afternoon, hours before her death. As I understand it, Catherine's estate is still in the probate courts, with lawyers kind of grabbing all of the assets that there really are. And what's left of that, which, Catherine had tried to cultivate a nest egg for her daughter so they wouldn't be dependent upon this abusive man, Alan Kassenoff, whose abuse has been well documented in the videos, which people can research. And I please encourage you to do that for yourself, because we don't want you to take our word for it. Like, an educated audience and an educated consumer is our best supporters. And so, where a lie hates being questioned, the truth never minds it, right? The truth always wants you to do your due diligence. So you can look up the clear abuse that these girls suffered at the hands of Alan Kassenoff and Catherine suffered, and understand why Catherine chose to leave, and then have the system that Catherine herself worked for. Remember, she used to be the assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York, coming from Yale Law School, coming from Cornell Law School, and helped to prosecute the 9/11 convictions, right? So that's a very powerful position. So to go from somebody who's that committed and believes in the justice system as a form of justice, as a place to go to get justice, only to find out that it's all a theater and smoke and mirrors. And there are moments that justice is given, right? Because it helps to gaslight the public to continue to rely on a system that's really meant to be there as an act of coercion, extortion, and human trafficking. So I think for Catherine, as she's explained it in her own words, that trauma just became so overwhelming, and being without her children and watching the system be used by an abusive man to commit his abuse far beyond what he could have done himself was just too much. And combined with her breast cancer, she then flew to Switzerland and opted for the assisted suicide. You're correct that Robbie Harvey, who was a TikTok phenom,
Right.
amassed attention, highlighting the ways in which domestic violence was committed against women, or that some of the systems were anti-women, grabbed onto Catherine's story because the evidence of abuse was so clear. She was so intelligent, so well documented, all of her case as it went on. And Robbie's like, how could this happen? How could this be?
Right.
So he was very proficient in doing what he does best, which is like getting the videos to the audience so they could see the evidence for themselves and understand what's happening in our court systems, the use of police, the use of children as pawns to try to traumatize any protective parent. And I want to be very cautious, because we often talk about women and mothers, but this does happen with men as well, where men are the recipients of narcissistic abuse by women, and they too can use the court system. So I do not subscribe to the belief that the court system is used as solely as a patriarchy to suppress women. It's not that there isn't evidence of that, but it doesn't explain everything. What does explain everything is that whoever the abuser is can use the court as a means by which to commit their abuse.
It's a money court. Money, money, money.
It's money, it's power, it's supporting evil, helping evil so that they can get away with their evil, right? Like goodness can stand on its own, whereas evil needs other evil to help it survive. Because if you stood up and you were the only evil one, then the good will come after you, right? But like if you're committing crimes and other people know that you're committing crimes, and then somebody else is using the same systems to commit the crimes, you need to help protect that person so that the system isn't exposed, and then therefore your crimes aren't exposed, right? So it's all linked in that way. In any case, so Robbie Harvey, as I understand it, brought this information to light to the public and said, do with it as you wish. Here's the videos of Alan. And Alan, of course, did what every lawyer does, which is use the system to then try and sue the whistleblower.
Right.
That unfortunately quieted Robbie. But some interesting things came out of that. So Gustinopoulos, who is well known and well documented to be an unscrupulous lawyer, and you have me saying that that's not just my opinion, it's documented, Gus, how many times you've screwed over your people that you were supposed to be representing. And so Gustinopoulos was representing Alan Kassenoff, and Alan enjoined Gus enlisted him as a plaintiff against Robbie Harvey, and Gus then asked to be removed from the case. Okay, so that in and of itself was kind of a slight to Alan Kassenoff. I don't have much update beyond that, because unfortunately Robbie Harvey has been subscribing to the, oh, it's confidential, it's an ongoing court case, I can't talk about it, and therefore I can't share information. I call bunk, because they're not talking about the actual truth of the case helps the perpetrator only and always without exception. So the idea that we have to keep it hush hush because it's an ongoing case, I don't subscribe to it at all.
Mm.
I think the truth is the truth, showing the evidence to the public, making sure that people can see the evidence for themselves instead of saying, you just have to take my word for it. And the rest is sealed by the court. It creates a really slippery slope and a dangerous premise that the court is the arbiter of truth. Mm-hmm. And it ignores the well-documented, obvious facts that just because a court does it, does not mean that it's lawful.
Right.
It does not mean that it's truthful. And so while it does define the act as legal, because the definition of legal is anything done by the court through the legal system. Mm-hmm. So yes, it's legal, but it's not lawful. It doesn't necessarily follow the letter and the intent of the law to which we are supposed to all subscribe and live by, and employ police to help protect and enforce those rights that we have established through our laws. So that's a really important part. I found Robbie Harvey's silence on it to be unfortunate. Mm-hmm. And again, that's his prerogative, but also understands when the court says, oh, this is a sealed case, so you can't talk about it. You have a right, you have the freedom of speech to always discuss, always talk about anything. If I choose to share my sealed court cases because I know that will uncover the fraud, the court does not actually have the lawful right to come back and say that I am in contempt of court because I shared sealed information. However, if a non-party shares sealed information without my express written permission and without the express written permission of the court, yes, then that is in contempt of court, but that's different from actual parties sharing the information with it.
Right, right.
The other thing that I found problematic about Robbie's case and the publicity around the Kassenoff case is that the media is willing to talk about these things after the damage has been done. Mm-hmm. Child gets murdered, let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. Mom kills herself, dad kills herself, let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. It's easy to stand on a soapbox when the damage has been done. Mm-hmm. If you have this tremendous platform that can be used to expose the truth, why aren't you doing what Marianne Petrie is doing and exposing the truth as it's going on with ongoing cases so that people can then make their own assessments as to whether or not our courts are a safe place that provide justice, or if our judges are the biggest criminals that we have and commit their crimes in plain view using nothing other than gaslighting and a black pajama robe to get their crime done, right?
A clown in a gown.
Yes, a clown in a gown. So where are we now? So as I understand it, again, I'm not, please don't take my word for it, do your own research, but as I understand it, that case is filed down in Florida where Robbie Harvey exists, had his homestead, and was in the tens of millions of dollars against Robbie. And then Robbie was then using his platform to try to get people to donate money to help his court case, which also, like Spidey, I don't like that. Jonathan Davidoff, who was supposed to be a very strong advocate, is was at the time that I knew the lawyer representing Kassenoff. Why isn't he doing this pro bono and then going after Kassenoff for legal fees and damages as would be entitled if this was a malicious use of the court in order to try and it's called abusive process, right? When there's been no
Mhm.
judgment yet, when you're using the court erroneously to try and coerce, extort, and punish somebody else, it's an abusive process. It's
Mhm.
malicious prosecution when there's already been when you've gone after somebody, tried to prosecute somebody through the court, and it's been overturned by the court, you can then go back to the person and seek damages saying that it was malicious prosecution. But that requires a decision by the court that the prosecution was in fact unnecessary and unwarranted, and only done as a means by which to try and coerce, extort, and punish somebody else. So there's perverse incentives involved here, right? I don't like when advocates, I understand the need for people to say, I want this to be my life's work, but I also have to make a living. So I understand the need for people to charge for their services. I've myself, as an advocate for people, never charge, absolutely never charge, because I don't ever want that to be confused. And that's not to say that I have a ridiculous amount of money by which to live off of that I don't have to charge. There are days that I have $6 over the course of 2 weeks and I'm trying to make ends meet, and I will still not charge people for their services. I get nervous when I hear that. I get nervous when I see I've got a platform of millions and I'm asking for money for my cases. Doesn't make me feel right. Doesn't mean that they're doing bad things. I want to make that clear. Doesn't mean that they're doing bad things. Doesn't mean, though, that it's a legitimate either. So let's talk about Alan Kassenoff. As we know, because of or after Robbie really brought this to the public's attention in a different way, Alan Kassenoff got let go from his law firm, which was phenomenal. Okay. As I understand it, he's employed by another. I could be wrong about that. Again, could be wrong about that. I tried to confirm it before this show and have not been able to get the proof to which I needed, to say. Mark Abrams. Mark Abrams was the forensic who was tied to Louis Lubell. Now, Louis Lubell was the judge in Catherine Kassenoff's case, also the judge in my case, also the judge in the Stephen J. Jones case, who was the lawyer that represented my husband and is he was disqualified from my case for his unethical practice, which I got done as a pro se, which was amazing.
That is amazing.
Pro se, no legal experience whatsoever. So how unethical do you have to be when the court's trying to help this multimillionaire law partner get, and they're like, sorry, this guy's so bad, we have to. In any case, Louis J. Lubell also was given awards by the Pace Women's Justice Center for his service, right? The Pace Women's Justice Center is supposed to be a center for domestic violence victims to go to get help, especially when they're being persecuted through the courts. So instead, the people that are doing the persecution are being honored by the very same organizations that are supposed to be protecting from us.
And that's, I think, sorry to interrupt you, that's why they need to be audited.
But they audit themselves. They're being
they can't be doing that
on paper. But it's right. The Nazis are checking on the Nazis, right? And when somebody keeps saying to me, like, Lizzie, I just don't understand. Why is the judge not helping me when the law was clearly broken? I was like, but say it like this. When I'm going to the Nazis to tell them that the Nazis captured my children, why isn't the Nazi releasing my children? And when you say it like that, then you're like, well, that's stupid. Of course they wouldn't. They know they've captured your children, and that's what they're trying to do. Okay, so the problem isn't that we're in a war with these, in a silent Holocaust with these Nazis. The problem is that most people don't want to acknowledge the silent Holocaust, and they instead are going to the Nazis thinking that they're going to help them from the Nazis. And like all abusers, they don't abuse 100% of the people 100% of the time, or people would recognize them as the abusers that they are, and perhaps say like, oh my God, our judges are criminals and we need to do something about it. So instead, they have some correct law-abiding, lawful rulings to gaslight the public that this is a place where you can come for justice, so that then they can abuse this other percentage. Now, I'd be very curious if we could get real numbers on what the percentage is, to see, is it always been this way? Like, because people are like, oh, it's getting so much worse. Is it? Or is it just that social media is now an outlet for us to be able to get the real news to people? Right. But, you know, I go back and watch cases from the 80s, and they're using the same language, the same set of facts, the same standard patterns of practice, the same bogus use of these fake orders of protection. I say fake, I should use the word bogus, right? Because they're legal documents that are done under false pretenses with false narratives used to protect the predators from their victims and to punish anybody trying to protect the victims, right? So let me just, I've kind of gone off a little bit, but let me go back to the Kassenoff case. So we've got Robbie Harvey came out, seemed like the hero, then gets sued by Alan Kassenoff. Alan Kassenoff loses his job, sues Robbie Harvey. Gustinopoulos, the lawyer who was representing Alan Kassenoff, asked to be removed from the Dinopoulos. Mark Abrams, who was the court forensic at the time, you know what? I might be wrong about that. He might have been the attorney for the children. Do you know if the, and I apologize.
I believe he was the AFC, the attorney for the children. Yep.
Okay. So he was on an approved listed board of court forensics. So during Catherine Kassenoff's life, she exposed that during her case, Louis Lubell officiated over Mark Abrams' marriage, and that they had a close personal relationship, and therefore there was a strong conflict of interest in her case. And Mark Abrams was then disqualified to be able to serve as a expert coming in on these, as a forensic coming in on these divorce cases. However, Mark Abrams was still being employed as an expert to submit his opinion to back up the work of, so it's like shifting the priest to a different
as usual. Yeah, typical.
Yeah, it's just it's we're just going to market it as something different. We're just going to, but they're still performing the same nefarious services to the court, and there is no true justice in whatever public humiliation that they underwent in order to be quote unquote gaslight the public that they were punished. I mean, the same thing, let's talk about the Harvey Weinstein, right? He was just recently released. Give me a freaking break, right? While he was in jail, I have confirmation that he had hourly visitors. Not allowed. He had trips on his private jet. I mean, was it really a punishment for him? Or was he strung up as a scapegoat to make everybody think that the Me Too movement had some real effect to gaslight them that there was a sense of justice and honor in our court system, only to then let the perpetrator off within a matter, a very short time. So that's what I know that's happening right now in the Kassenoff case. Unfortunately, all of Catherine's assets, as I started to say, it's been a money grab by the existing probate and the lawyers and everything else. And so there's very little left for her girls. And the person who is the executive of her estate is fighting as much as possible to keep things in her daughter's name. But because she committed suicide prior to any formal divorce filing, they're not officially divorced. So everything that she fought hard for all goes back to Alan Kassenoff. Disgusting.
Yes.
Disgusting. disgusting. And, you know, we hear these cases. Even while she was alive, Catherine and I talked about how we could bring this to light, what we can do to try and make this more visible and more transparent to everybody, right? Because one of the biggest crazy making parts of this is that when you're going through it and you get your story out there, you start becoming aware that not only is your story not unique, it is so boring because it is such a common use of the court that the people who have survived it have almost outgrown the outrage. Because you'll talk to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, let me guess. So then they got an order of protection. Oh yeah. And then you expose that your children were being sexually abused. And so the judge gave the children to the sexual abuser and took your homes away. Oh yeah, you didn't get clothes. Well, guess what? I didn't either. Oh, you didn't get access to even your pets. You couldn't get your neither did I. You couldn't get, like, it's so boring because the pattern of practice is the same. And I'm not talking about the same in New York State. I'm not talking about the same in our country. I'm talking worldwide. Worldwide, we get contacts from people in Europe, Canada, South America, Latin America, all saying the same thing. And do I think Louis Lubell is calling the judge in Sweden and saying, hey, let's do it this way? No, I think it's a standard pattern of practice by which they know that they can kidnap and sex traffic children to pedophiles within their family, and then torture anybody trying to protect the child and control them by false imprisonment, by financial devastation, by even these false narratives, getting the false narratives out to the court. Again, like some of these orders that come from the judges are so blatantly false, lay the false narrative out there. And when Joe Q. Public has been watching enough Law and Order that they believe that judge knows what he's doing, and you read the orders, that in and of itself, like the slander by the court, right? It's enough to destroy people's accurate reputations. It's just crazy making, because when you're in it, not only can you not deny it, it's so common, it's boring. And if you're not in it, it's so against anything that you've ever believed in your life that you question that it could even be possible. So you've got this massive dichotomy of the general public thinking that it's not possible to happen, and then this side to understand that it not only is it possible, it's so obvious, it's predictable. There's a positive predictability. I can tell you what your judge is likely to do next to punish you because it's a standard playbook that they use. And then we miss this outrage in the middle. We miss that, the call to action. But slowly I'm finding, and what I think is going to happen is that the people who aren't financially devastated, financially, emotionally, physically devastated by the court, because the courts are jailing and drugging people, myself included, right? Falsely jailing and drugging whistleblowers for no other reason than saying that they love their children or bringing the evidence to light that somebody's a pedophile. So we're talking about physical harm, actual physical harm caused by the court. And if you can survive that, most people come out of it unable to stand in their strength and tell their story. Most people come out of it and say either they turn to drugs and alcohol, they turn to suicide, or they just want to live in denial and say, I don't ever want to talk about that again. And I'm going to just proceed with a different, sorry, a little bit of wind here outside.
That's okay.
Proceed. I'm just going to proceed as though I never had kids. I can't, they left me. They're adults now. There's nothing I can do. And instead of recognizing the Stockholm syndrome and trying to fight to still save the relationship, they just move on into another world. And I think what's happening is Joe Q. Public is who is not yet directly impacted by having their children taken, being financially, is waking up to the truth. And they're going to start doing what they can, leveraging what we can to give consequences to these people, right?
And I think more of it's happening to John Q. Public, because apparently what I have learned is 1 out of 20 people are sociopaths.
Really?
So that's why the well-oiled machine of family court is constantly churning and burning and destroying, because people are getting hauled in there whether they want to or not, such as in my case. I had no desire to go in there. Because yeah, right.
Hey, me either. I was like, I don't want this with the courts. I don't want, let's just like deal with this privately within our family.
Right.
Let's just stop abusing children, Brian. Stop abusing our children. Stop gaslighting and trying to drug me like you psycho. What are you doing? Right? Like, you deserve to have an honest, beautiful life, just like everybody else. But the fact that you've been abused as a child does not give you the right to abuse other children. Like, and that's it. And I know that you're ashamed by what you've done, or I know that you want to normalize that and just be like, no, it's great that like an adult can like have a sexual love for a child and that child has a sexual, no, it's not.
No.
You want to normalize that behavior. You think I'm going to be quiet about it. Why can't you just be a good person? Why can't you just stop abusing our children? Stop abusing me. Stop being on child porn sites. Stop soliciting children. And just, do you want it to stop? And he was like, yeah, I do. But I do think that people that are indoctrinated into this practice don't believe that it can actually stop. I don't think that they know that they themselves are capable of it. I think that message that we send out there, that, cast a stone around, God says, cast a stone around their neck and throw them in the water, because that's the only thing that we can do for them. I think I understand why people believe that, but they've got to understand that sending that message out, why wouldn't anybody then kill and fight for their life? If you're a pedophile, if this person's a pedophile and they know that people are going to find out,
right?
There's no option for them to accept accountability, come clean, help their victims heal, and themselves turn away from the practice. Because if they come out, they're told, we're going to kill you or put you in jail. Now, that's not actually what happens, but they're told they'll be like trashed by society to such a degree that their life is meaningless. So no wonder why these people, it's a kill or be killed situation for them, right?
Right. And I like how you mentioned, this comes from Book of Mark 9:42. But if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and to be thrown into the sea. And hey, I'm all for it.
Well, that's I think why God put me on this path, is because I have a different understanding of that. If I say to somebody, if you do this, we're going to kill you, where's the space for healing? Where's the space for them to say, I did it because this was done to me, and I don't ever want to do this to anybody else again. Please help me stop and help me heal and help me help my victims heal. where's the space for that? We don't give them a space for that. So, and I have to say, for my part, which I'm very proud of, that is the space that I gave to my husband. That when I went to Brian Stryker Weinstein, partner Davis Polk and Wardwell, and I'm naming names here, right? And I said, I see what you've done. I see your life. I found your child porn. Do you want it to stop? And he said, yes. And I said, okay. I found a space within myself to understand that should he be killed for what he did, it wouldn't heal anything. The most healing situation is for him to acknowledge, turn away from the practice, stop the practice, and acknowledge the patterns of practice that happened to bring him into that space, that he then perpetuated against his victims, so that they could then recognize that and know the difference between violence and love, understand the difference between love and control, understand the difference between passion and abuse, right? And be able to heal themselves, and then the victims be able to live an honest, beautiful life, right? But part of living that honest, beautiful life is you have to have that accountability. You have to have that exposure, and you have to have an option for redemption. We're not giving an option for redemption. We're giving an option for death. And it hasn't worked so far. No. So I think as a society, we need to try something else. But let's just talk about real quick. Like, I'd like to circle back, because I think like Catherine's statements, like, do not let my death be in vain, right? So this is a 1 year anniversary of her death. And so far, we've seen that there's been a lot of talk about justice that happened in the Kassenoff case. But when you actually look at what's really come out, not much has happened.
No.
And this continued use of the court to traffic children to their pedophile abusers and to their abusers by the use of this bogus order of protection, which is what they also use to take the homes away from people, take your property away from people, violate your freedom of speech, right? It's this bogus use of orders of protection. And so now there are 3 cases. Stacy Penn up in Buffalo, New York. That's Stacy Sonolita Penn, Buffalo. And that's Penn versus Penn, PYNN. Theodore Antar, who was a law student in Connecticut and filed a federal lawsuit to show all the harm that was being done in the state courts to kidnap and traffic her children to a known abuser, somebody that she had an actual order of protection against, who had been violent and strangled. And now he's got custody of the child, taken from Theodore by Port Authority police in another state, while she had full custody. I mean, it's insane. Esther Deutsch, who her case is in New York, in the down in Suffolk County, where her husband Moisha is a very rich, influential Orthodox Jew who was sexually abusing his son. And what he would do was, his son would, after he abused his son, he would be like, oh, wake up, honey. You were having a bad dream.
Ooh.
Daddy's here to help you now. Are you okay? To gaslight the child, right? And so the mom comes out to protect the children. And what ends up happening, they give the mom, they get the perpetrator an order of protection against the mother, traffic all the children to their sexual abuser, and then say that the even the adult children still have an AFC and are being listed by Moisha Deutsch on existing orders of protection without the children's petition. Child, okay, yes. Are they a child of the marriage? Yes, but they're now of adult age. And the judges are issuing orders of protection using attorneys for the children still as an AFC, as though they're minors when they are not minors. And the judge is specifically saying, hey, I know they're not minors, but they were minors 5 years ago when I issued this, so I'm going to continue. It's not how the law works. It's not how the law works. But these judges have omnipotent power. And so they're using these orders of protection to traffic the children to the abuser. And then if the protective parent speaks out in any way, using the threat of jail against the protective parent to violate their freedom of speech, to coerce them into behaviors that they want, which is to deny the abuse, say that the child is lying, say that they lied in order to punish the father, which is ridiculous, right? Because what punishment have they received? We have been left homeless, without our children, without our mail, our passports stolen, my Easy Pass cut off, my health care cut off, but I'm punishing the husband. How? Because it's embarrassing for him that you talked about this. Okay, well, equal embarrassment for me. So where do we go? How do we stop this behavior from occurring, that the courts use these orders of protection? And I think we as Joe Q Public can do two important things. Number one is that we demand open criminal courts whenever an order of protection is to be used, okay? And people that want secrecy in the courts, including the victims that are like, oh, it's so traumatic for me, I don't want people. I'm sorry. In our country, there is a tenet of justice, black letter law, that says your accuser has a right to face you, right? So the thing that they're now going to issue orders of protection, like with Kayleigh's law, Kayleigh, lifetime orders of protection, and the victim never has to come to court. And it's to protect the victim. It doesn't protect the victim. What it does is it gives the judge omnipotent power to kidnap and traffic people without even having to have a hearing. It's disgusting. So we as the public need to stand up and demand that hearings involving orders of protection, which strip people of their rights to liberty, to engage with others, your freedom of speech, your right to bear arms, like it takes away, it infringes upon most of our constitutional rights, these orders of protection. Those need to be open hearings. And if a judge is issuing orders of protection, as they did in the Antar case, the Deutsch case, the Penn case, and my case, without even any Article 8 evidence that qualifies for an order of protection, so they're like, oh, it's harassing for the perpetrator that the victim is talking about this. Okay, well, for actual harassment in New York State, you have to show threats to bodily harm. Me saying, here's the evidence of pedophilia from Brian Stryker Weinstein, I'm not saying I'm going to hurt him, physically harm him. I'm not making any threats against his physical person. The judge knows that that doesn't qualify for an order of protection. And so when we find that judges are issuing these orders of protection without actual evidence, they should be disbarred. We have to have accountability. And in the meantime, before we can do that, what can you as the Joe Q Public do? I think educate yourself about the abuse of the courts and take action so that when you find yourself honoring these people in your community, don't be afraid to question them.
Question
Don't be,
everything.
yes, don't be afraid to say, I've been hearing a lot of cases where judges are actually committing crimes to the court. Have you ever had any experience with that? If I look at any of your cases, will I ever find a use of an order of protection against a mother who was saying she was being abused? And can you tell me your side about that?
Mhm.
Question them. Let it be known that we're educating ourselves. Let it be known that this is not we recognize this practice as parasitic to a healthy society, and we're not going to tolerate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
especially these attorney for children. These are the third-party parasites that really need to go.
yes.
We don't
Oh,
need
yeah.
them. We don't need them.
Right. We don't need them. Okay, so let's talk about that for a few seconds. New York State, they had, I believe it was in 2019, like a blue ribbon commission to talk about the use of forensics in the courtroom. And they determined at that time that they were the easiest way to buy and trade custody, that there was financial incentives, that they weren't actually providing evidence as much as they could just provide false testimony for a judge to then use as a platform to traffic children, but it doesn't qualify as actual evidence, right? And so their recommendation was that you do away entirely with the forensic evaluator. Okay. So then what happened after that? 2022 we had, or 2021, we had a new blue ribbon commission to talk about. That's all they do.
Yeah,
Let's just
that's
talk
all.
about it. Let's make people think that we're listening to them because we're going to give you a fake platform, and let's nod our heads a bunch, and let's just get like, and I'll, at the risk of isolating her, I'll call it out again. Joan Meyer. She runs the, this domestic violence research center under George Washington, talking about, but yet she's like, we won't get involved in individual cases, because if we talk about individual cases, then we disqualify ourselves as a bystander. Well, let's just take that into real life, shall we? Somebody's watching a child get beaten. Okay. Now, if that person gets involved, stops the perpetrator, and holds them until the police come, do the police then say, oh, I'm sorry, you're no longer an unbiased bystander, but you got involved, and so therefore your testimony is discredited as to what happened because you got involved to stop the abuse? Of course not. Of course not. But it's the same bullshit gaslighting that these people use. And so what does Joan do? She gets paid a lot of money to develop this platform where it just tells a story but doesn't actually make a difference.
Right.
And like in my case, I wrote to Joan and I said, Joan, do you know of other domestic violence abusers like Brian Stryker Weinstein and his posse who are defendants in my federal lawsuit in the Southern District of New York? And you can look at that up. It was Elizabeth Harding Weinstein versus Briarcliff et al. And that was filed in 2021, March 8th, 2021 in the Southern District. And I was like, do you know of other cases where the defendants in a federal case, and I'm talking about the lawyer, the chief of the assistant detective or chief detective and the Briarcliff Police Department, and my husband, who are legal adversaries of mine, then going to court to try to seek guardianship over me as both the lawyer filing for the case, the petitioner, and the witness, right? Clear conflict of interest. So you file for divorce, and then you file federal lawsuits and appellate lawsuits, and then the defendants in your lawsuits go and seek guardianship over.
Oh, what you have been through.
No, but the idea is, I brought this to Joan Meyer before it happened, and I said, if you, as Joan Meyer, writes a letter or an affidavit to the court to say, hey, this is a clear conflict of interest, even just to the average casual outside observer, and we will not tolerate this, and this agency is taking a big interest in this particular case, Do you understand that you could have not only stopped my guardianship, but then the use of guardianships in the windfall of other guardianships, because I'm kind of the canary in the coal mine. Let's do it to them. And if that works out, like, let's take a highly competent Ivy League graduate with no psych history, no criminal history, who runs our entire family estate in the tens of millions of dollars, who just oversaw multi-million-dollar projects with using our money and got it on time, under budget, and say she's incompetent by people that have a clear conflict of interest and are defendants in her case. And if they can take guardianship over somebody like that, that's a canary in the coal mine. If we can do it there, we can do it in so many other cases, right? All she had to do was write a letter to say, there's a clear conflict of interest in having defendants in a federal case seek guardianship over their legal adversary. And this is improper. And we recommend that the court throw this out right away. And we're going to keep a keen eye on it. It could have changed the trajectory. But hiding behind we're just the bystander, we can't get involved. Okay, so what does that do? It gives her a platform to take money as a domestic violence advocate, but not actually make a difference. Do you understand?
Right.
And this use of court watching, even many court watching agencies that are like, oh, we can't report the unlawful activities of the court because we're supposed to be unbiased.
Oh, I have.
Yes. Yes. But if you look at the national court watching agencies that are well established within our country, many of them will say, oh, we're just collecting data because we want to be allowed in the court and we don't want to be seen as biased. Well, again, if you jump in when you see that child getting beaten, does that diminish your voice? Or does that actually strengthen it? Because why would you get involved if there was no crime being committed? Right. So it's, we just need to open our eyes more to this practice. We need to understand that Catherine Kassenoff's case has not been brought to justice. Even the very specific people in her case have not been brought to justice. Catherine asked that her death not be in vain. I'd like to think that we can continue the work to make sure that it is in vain. But you look at the Penn case. I mean, okay, let's just for 5 seconds. The guy is a lawyer for Child Protective Services who is using his agency of Child Protective Services to traffic children to known sexual abusers in the area. And then was documented with credible evidence by doctors, nurses, school nurses, employees, and to be sexually abusing his own children who had come out and disclosed the abuse. And the court was like, okay, well, let's make it clear, Mr. Penn, Matthew Penn, up in Buffalo, New York, you can no longer be a lawyer for Child Protective Service, but we're going to give you full custody of your children. I mean, it's stupid. And then Stacey's working her tail off to pay the pedophile so that, quote unquote, child support, so that he can sexually abuse her children in plain view, and nobody will do it. And on record, the judge pulls Stacey into the courtroom and says, Miss Penn, if anybody, and I mean anybody in the history, comes again to tell me about that they were sexually abused or trafficked by Mr. Penn, I'm going to find you and put you in jail. Do you understand me? I mean, total abuse of power.
Well, yeah, I mean, Martin Luther King said our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter.
Correct.
And, you know, there comes a time when silence is betrayal.
No, it's always betrayal.
Yes.
It's always betrayal. It's always. And the idea that, like, when you're speaking the truth, it's embarrassing to the children. No, it's not. Nobody looks at Malala and says, oh my God, it's so embarrassing you got raped. Everybody says, what a hero you are for standing up against your abuse and standing up against your abusers and coming out and talking about it. The people spreading the rumor that talking about this abuse is embarrassing for the kids are the perpetrators. And do the kids feel shame, and do they feel? Yes, I believe they do, but that's because it's beaten into them. They have that false, neural pathway in their head that somehow, because they were the victim, that they're unworthy. That's not true. You're the victim because these people are disgusting parasites.
Oh, yes.
Who seek you out. That does not diminish your worth. There's no embarrassment in being the victim of abuse. All of that shame and embarrassment falls squarely on the shoulders of the perpetrator. And all the people that are saying, shh, it's embarrassing for the kids, are helping the perpetrator forever and always. So these cases are just so clear cut. It's so obvious. Esther Deutsch had to leave the country because it wasn't a post. She responded to somebody and she wrote, "I miss my," and then put 3 red heart emojis. Nothing can be construed by that as using her children's names, speaking openly about her husband. The judge just recently found her in criminal and civil contempt of an order of protection that's never lawful from the beginning, because she's never even been given a trial on it. But yet that unlawful order of protection has been unlawfully extended for years. And so Esther Deutsch chose to leave the country instead of being subjected to jail time and the drugging and abusing, which, she knew that they did to me, through the court systems. Theodore Antar had her 2 children kidnapped, one up in Boston and one in New York. Her case is in Connecticut. Kidnapped by the Port Authority police. She's about to go on vacation with her kids, and the Port Authority show up. Port Authority, they have no right. Show up and they take the children out of her arms. And they abscond with the children. Now, you could say in one case, if the judge wanted to issue an order that she could not travel outside the state, then that order had to be issued and served to her prior to leaving the state by a Connecticut lawful representative. The Port Authority police in Boston don't have the authority to properly serve her with those documents. And I was on the phone with her when she then went to New York to try and fly out of New York, because she was like, I just have to get away and get a little vacation time with my daughter and process what just happened to me. And then she has full custody of her daughter, and the Port Authority police show up, and then they were like, well, we're now going to serve you this order that was issued by a Connecticut judge without a hearing, a change of custody order without a hearing, which is unlawful in Connecticut. And that was ex parte.
Of course.
And you've now been served. And she's like, this does not mean proper service. And even if this was proper service, it doesn't say that I have to turn over my child to any place. It says the child has to be given to the father. I will take the child to the father right now, and you can accompany me there. And they said, no, we're grabbed the screaming baby from her and ran off out of the airport.
Terrible.
But this is what's happening in plain view. And people want to think that we have some justice because a TikToker spoke about a case for a couple months after it happened. We're deeper in the hole, and perhaps given the perpetrators more fire to think they can get away with it.
But
I think what's happening on the flip side is that people are waking up. People who are not directly impacted, maybe they know a sister that's had it, or a cousin, or it happened to their mother, or it's happening to their granddaughter. And they're starting, so people with means, with um, I don't want to say power, but people who are not yet disempowered by the system are waking up to the evils of the system. And I think that we're either going to have a quick correction by the court, again, to gaslight people into thinking that something was done, or we're going to have, within the next decade, an overhaul of our system. I'm hoping.
I'm hoping.
What do
I'm
you
hoping.
see as a path?
I'm hoping it gets abolished within my lifetime.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Wouldn't that be awesome? And
Wouldn't that be
I'd
amazing?
love to have you back on. It was great chatting with
So
you.
great talking with you. Thank you.
But
And please ask your public to follow my case. I'm still in this illegal guardianship. It's out of Westchester County, New York.
of
I have
course.
Judge Robert DiBella as my judge, and he has before him a motion to terminate my guardianship, showing that I'm employed, I live and function independently. This guy is trafficking, stealing all of my money, has just given all of my assets, multi-million dollars assets, back to my husband, to Brian Stryker Weinstein. And that there's no evidence of incompetency or of neural deficits, neurological deficits, and that I have several physician reports to the court stating we've done a full examination and there's no neurological deficits of this woman and she's fully functional. And yet Robert DiBella, Brian Stryker Weinstein, Kenneth L. Bunting, just trafficking women, stealing money, stealing assets, all in plain view. It's disgusting. Can't see my kids still. I'm told that I can't see my 17-year-old son unless I agree that my 21 and almost 20-year-old can be with him and use a supervisor, which is a handler, in order to talk to me. And I was like, no, they're adults. They can just call me. But Brian wants to make sure that my adult children won't contact me independently and break out from his spell. So he's trying to get me to agree that I'll talk to my youngest son and let my adult children use it.
Oh my God.
And because I won't, I can't even talk to my youngest son. It's just so stupid.
The course of control. Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, my story's boring. It happens to a lot of people.
But they're all multifaceted. Every case is like the same, but it's different.
Yes.
And I want to have you back on again, though.
I love speaking with you, girl. It's always great to partner with other advocates who are unabashed about getting the truth out there and understanding the truth protects you always and forever. And if they're going to come after me for telling the truth, they're going to come after me anyways.
Right.
And do it. Come after me. Like you've set my house on fire. You've drugged me. You've kidnapped me. You've chained me to walls. You left me for dead. You've left me homeless. You cut off my finances. Like you left me no money to eat or live for. And here I am.
Yeah.
Here I am. So like, keep trying, I guess, like I'm still going to keep getting the truth out there. So
and
I
glad
appreciate that you are as well. It means the world to me.
I appreciate you speaking out. I hope this gives the other people strength to speak out is what we need.
Yeah. And I hope people research Catherine Kassenoff and her case so they understand just how clearly the court is inexplicably being used by perpetrators to commit their domestic violence, to traffic children, and to financially, physically, and mentally devastate anybody trying to protect the children.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah.
Hey, don't jump off.
Okay.
Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Join us again here with Elizabeth Harding Weinstein and other exciting guests. And you can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, iTunes, other platforms I don't even know I'm on. And again, feel free to buy me a coffee to keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne.